Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So I'm going to get straight into it. I want to talk in detail about capacity because after having a panic attack yesterday about the economy, which affects demand and volumes, I decided that it's time to try and crack the capacity problem, or at least try and understand it. So today we're going to be talking about the oversupply of trucks, which is a big part of why rates are so bad right now. And I really would love to hear your opinions. Ready? Let's go. When trying to measure the amount of capacity that is available in the market, one thing is crystal clear. There is no accurate way to measure capacity in the market. We are forced to make a ton of assumptions. So, one by one, let's go through them. Every single week, we take a look at capacity, the net increase or decrease in carrier population. But what we're actually looking at is the amount of MCs increasing or decreasing. And pretty much every single week, we have seen that there is a net decrease in MC numbers, which means that more people are leaving this industry in terms of shutting down their authority than opening their authority. But now let's dig deeper. How many of those new entrants that just came into the trucking industry are actually able to find work, whether on the contract side or on the spot market side? On the contract side, shippers are pretty much set because they have ample capacity to choose from. And on top of that, from personal experience, shippers are not as likely to work with small carriers. So the contract side is likely out. Now, what about the spot market side? Well, there we have brokers who are completely jaded by the amount of fraud that is happening in this industry. So they are very picky and they will usually not work with a motor carrier who has an MC and authority that is less than 1 year old, except for a handful of brokers like TQL or CH Robinson. So the reality is, while there are always carriers every single week that are entering the trucking industry, they're not necessarily competing with existing carriers because of the barriers that are currently in trucking. Now, to figure out what is actually happening with authorities and how many carriers actually come in versus go out, I decided to look at this chart by Sonar. The blue line is revocations, how many carriers left. And then we have the white line, which is the net change in carrier population. So as of last week, we saw that 1,316 carriers left the industry, but the net change in carrier population was 227 carriers lost. So taking these two numbers together, it's not difficult to figure out that 1,089 carriers actually entered the trucking market as of last week. But those same carriers are not necessarily able to actually haul freight because of the barriers that exist. So they're not necessarily, at least not all of them, are competing with the existing carriers. The next question is, when a carrier decides to shut down their MC, what happens to the actual people who were working under that motor carrier? Do those folks leave this industry completely and go and work in a different industry, or are they somehow redistributed within the trucking industry, which would mean that all that capacity leaving that we see in these charts means absolutely nothing other than the fact that it's more difficult to have your own authority right now. Well, in order to figure out whether these folks are getting redistributed within the trucking industry, we have to look at a few things. Number one, we have to look at trucking jobs. Number two, we have to look at new truck orders, Class 8 truck orders. And number three, we do have to look at the used truck market. So let's take a look at trucking industry jobs first to see whether they're increasing, decreasing, whether more or less people get redistributed to other carriers. Now, unfortunately, the latest data by the Bureau of Labor Statistics is from June of 2024. But what we found is that only 100 trucking jobs were eliminated from the economy in June of 2024. Now, while that sounds like a very small amount, it is the third consecutive month of losses in the trucking job sector. But before this, it was 5 months of growth in terms of jobs. This means that carriers are actually still hiring folks. And something that I notice over and over again is people saying that I cannot find a job. What is happening right now is carriers, for the most part, are becoming becoming very, very picky about who they actually onboard. And this is because of insurance, which now has very strict requirements about the amount of experience driver has to have in order to be insured. Now, in terms of the new equipment orders as well as the used equipment market, why are those important? Well, because if we just look at the new equipment orders, they tell us absolutely nothing. Carriers might be ordering new trucks in order to expand their fleet, or they might be ordering new trucks in order to replace existing older equipment. So we have to look at both to understand what is happening. So right away, according to ACT research, Class 8 orders in August were 16,400 units, up month over month, but down 16% year over year. But if we take a look at the used truck market, I'm going to attach it right here, we see that the inventory levels are actually decreasing. According to Sandhills, the chart is by Sandhills, inventory levels fell by 2.75% month over month and almost 4% year over year in August. And they say, and I quote, "Notably, used sleeper trucks and used day cab inventory levels are now roughly equivalent. This marks a shift as sleeper truck inventory has historically been double that of a day cab." So we have a situation where new truck orders have increased while the used truck market inventory has decreased. And while I'm sure that some of those new truck orders are there to replace existing equipment, therefore not adding capacity to the market, we do have to remember a couple of things. Number one, people might be just holding on to their used trucks because they simply cannot afford to replace them. And or some of those trucks are there to actually expand the fleets. To top it off, according to Transport Topics, July used truck sales jumped by 17% compared to last year. Transport Topics actually states that it's possible that some used truck buyers may be refreshing their fleets with younger pre-owned equipment. The next question is, of course, how many invisible carriers are out there? And when I say invisible, I mean those carriers that you will not see in any data. You know, those folks who park their trucks, keep their MC active, waiting for better times. Those carriers, they kind of go under the radar when it comes to trying to understand the capacity data. And this is because they will hit the road and add to capacity when seasonality hits and rates are anticipated to be good, and then quietly leave and park their trucks and remove from that capacity when they anticipate the market is going to be bad. So this is one of those data points that we will never see, unfortunately, those incognito carriers who add to or subtract from capacity depending on whether there is an uptick or downturn. And another question on capacity, which is absolutely impossible to answer because of how well it's hidden: how many illegal operations are competing with US truckers? When I say illegal operations, I'm talking about, for example, the B1 drivers and the carriers who hire them as cheap labor to transport goods throughout the US. They're allowed to transport from Canada to the US and then go back. They're allowed to transport from Mexico to the US and then go back. They're not allowed to transport within the United States. How many of those drivers are out there? I'm also talking about the new CDL holders who are looking to work for another carrier, and the carrier accepts them without insuring them because their insurance company will not accept anyone without 2 years of experience. So those folks, those drivers, often they don't even know this is happening. They are driving kind of illegally because they're completely uninsured, and the carrier has more bodies to transport freight without having to get another insurance that is more expensive that will accept those new CDL holders. And of course, I'm talking about those instances. I'm sure there is more than one. I've read about one, but I'm sure there's more than one where there are folks who are actually operating semi-trucks without a valid CDL. So after looking at all of these factors, all of which provide a tiny little bit of insight into what is happening with capacity, the one thing that I have realized is that there is absolutely no way to figure out what is happening with capacity in the trucking industry. All we can do is assume certain things about the data that is out there. What do you guys think? Do you think that the amount of dispatchable trucks is decreasing? Or do you think it's a situation where it might decrease in one area, but then it's replaced, that loss is replaced in a different area? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching and joining me today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and a great start to your week next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep learning, and I will see you in the next video.